You've thought about creating an estate plan to make things clear and hopefully easier for your heirs. But have you put anything in writing? And if you haven't done it, do you know if your parents have? Well, Dave Nienaber and Joe Patterson work with families, and they've seen the stress this can cause. It's good to be with you, gentlemen. Glad to see you back. And Dave, let's start with you. What have you seen when it comes to generations and estate planning?
Patrice, most simply, we've seen a lot, which should make for a good episode today. There's plenty of content when it comes to estate planning. Obviously, Joe and I take great pride in helping our clients prepare their appropriate estate plan and communicate those wishes to their children and to their helpers. But increasingly, we are seeing that the great care that our clients take has not always been taken for their parents. And guess who is left to clean up that mess when a parent passes away? So today, Joe and I are excited to be with you and talk about some of the ways to improve that dynamic. It's pretty consistent across our client base. So hopefully, this is a relevant topic to a lot of folks.
Well, if you're seeing it across a lot of places, yes, I think it probably is. Yeah.
I think, Patrice, before we dive into some of our examples and just suggestions for improving this dynamic, I think it'd be helpful if we first just take a step back and talk about some of the things that we do for clients. And that I think will help set the stage for ways to improve your parents' estate planning. So, for some of our clients, they're going to take these things for granted. But I guess, Joe, if you could kick us off and just talk about some of the things we do as part of the financial planning process, and that hopefully will set the stage for some things to improve for our parents and loved ones.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, one of the areas where we start with our clients is building a net worth. And in layman's terms, I would think of this as putting your arms around your financial situation and your picture. Every client we work with needs help with this. For some, it's simple. They're highly organized. They have everything on one place. For some, it's a big push. They have lots of accounts with lots of different custodians. So just the process of getting our heads collectively around those accounts, understanding where everything is, taking some steps to kind of reduce the number of accounts. That process of simplification is where we often start with our clients. We need to know everything you have, understand it, make sure it's titled appropriately. If it's not, then that's something to work on. But just that inventory process is hugely beneficial, and it's something that maybe our clients' parents haven't done.
Mhm. I always enjoy taking a look at a client's net worth and then looking back 4 or 5, 15 years in the past to see what it once looked like and what it looks like today. I always find that really eye opening. And to your point, Joe, a lot of our clients and their parents likely haven't taken the same time to thoughtfully consolidate their net worth as much as possible. I think another area that obviously we help our clients with is estate planning, both during life, making sure that you have the appropriate power of attorney on file with your bank, with your investment custodian, having family meetings, saying out loud what your wishes are and who your helpers are. And some of that can be a little bit awkward, but that certainly helps in this process. And then when our clients do pass away, they give their loved ones a phone number and they say, call Joe, call Dave. They know everything, they'll help you out. And unfortunately, for our clients, when they're dealing with their parents' affairs, seldom is it that simple. They're starting back with what Joe described of what is the inventory? What do they own? What do they owe? So that can be really helpful to our clients' children that they have that in place, but it doesn't necessarily help them with their parents' affairs. Joe, are there other areas that you see that kind of the foundation we set for our clients that maybe their parents don't always have in place?
Yeah, I would say one area that we see our clients having some challenges with their parents is lifestyle decisions. And so we'll work with our clients proactively to think about, all right, let's be prepared for the next move, next transition, well in advance of when you actually need to do it. That's challenging, right? So encouraging our clients to look at new living situations, to think about downsizing or right sizing. We got a whole podcast on that. if you want to look back at that discussion. And also, making these decisions when not under duress. So that proactive planning is something that Dave and I and others here on the team have talked with our clients regularly. Mom and dad have the wealth to make a change. They need to make a change. They don't want to make a change. So another situation where we try to be proactive, but then in the midst of that proactivity, we're trying to help our existing clients, help their parents because they're going through these challenges they haven't prepared or they haven't wanted to prepare. And I think that leads kind of into, well, why the heck are we talking about this? We haven't really answered that question yet.
Yeah. And why are we talking about it? It's incredible how much misinformation is out there. I actually appreciate more doing this job why people are paralyzed to start their estate plan, to start those conversations, because so much of the information they hear just doesn't apply to them, or it's well intentioned, it's just not right. There's a lot of bad information out there. On top of that, of Americans that don't have a will, 40% think they don't have sufficient assets to require one. In addition to that, uh, 43% say, maybe I need one, but I'll do it when I really need it. And as Joe and I have experienced with clients, when you really need it, it's probably too late to put together a thoughtful estate plan. And while some of the advice we hear from neighbors and friends is well intentioned, so often it just doesn't apply universally. Have you seen that with clients, Joe?
Yeah, that's a great point, Dave. Everyone's circumstances are different, and we can't emphasize that enough. Individual circumstances are different. Family circumstances are different. Wealth is different. Uh, Marriage situations are different. There's so many variables that create the pie that is each family that we work with. And beyond that, then each state is different. So, you know, your friend in Ohio is going to have a different experience settling in a state for their parents than your friend in Florida or California. Uh, Ohio, Dave and I, when we work with our Ohio clients, have it kind of ingrained in our minds that probate equals bad. We want to avoid probate at all costs in Ohio. But some states, like Kentucky, for example, Kentucky probate is pretty easy. So those differences, some states have inheritance taxes, many don't. There's a lot of those little details that can make that, hey, my friend said type advice not the most reliable.
Hmm. Yeah, I was recently working with a client in Ohio, and their house has a transfer on death, and it makes it really easy on their estate. And their attorney recommended that. And they have parents in New York, and they thought, well, we'll just do the same transfer on death. It works so well in Ohio. Well, guess what? We talked to a New York based attorney, and that doesn't work in New York. So each state is very different.
Well, now, speaking of the clients who are taking care of themselves, they're doing it why? What made the difference in their life that they would decide to make these preparations and their parents didn't?
Yeah, I think there's a generational issue there. If you take someone that's 80 years old today and you ask, have you ever settled in a state? Or what did you learn from settling in a state? There's a good chance they've never been through that process. Their parents had a pension and maybe they owned a house and a car. And their thought of settling in a state is pretty simple. You open a probate, you seek an attorney, they go through the probate process, you transfer the title of the house. But each generation seems to become more complex. Now, if you're 80 and facing estate planning, you probably have an IRA, a Roth IRA. Perhaps someone sold you an annuity along the way, your house, your car. Things are just more complex. And that makes the careful estate planning process even that much more important.
Yeah, I think today, that's a great point, Dave, about generational differences. I think that extends to just the philosophy of money and how different generations think about money. There's this level of privacy. It's almost kind of like a secrecy that a lot of older clients or parents of clients have regarding their finances. That's a whole separate podcast. on its own. But, you know, the reasons are numerous. It's, generational distress. It's they're not they may not be proud of all the decisions that they've made. They want equality among the family. They don't want to feel like someone is getting into their affairs who's not part of the inner circle. I read an interesting fact recently that you could be an executor of a will and not even know it. That basically almost half the time, not even half the time, were executors aware that they were actually the executors named in a document. So,
Until
um,
after the fact?
yeah, so a lot of people who
Whoa.
draft a will or other documents, they don't go and say, "Hey, by the way, I've named you as this person in this document because I feel like you'll be a great helper for me and the family, when that time comes." So there's just this, like I said, this almost secrecy of, we don't talk about money, and that's counter to what Dave and I do, which is, we want to have discussions with families and multi-generational meetings in some cases, and get all the stuff out on the table so that it's not a surprise in an already stressful time, which is inevitably when someone passes away, right? So let's not layer on stress and anxiety when that's already what people are feeling, right? You know, we've seen a few times where a surviving spouse kind of has in their minds, well, this is how my husband had it, so I'm just going to. That's something we've seen, and it doesn't have to make sense. That's just how they feel, right?
Yeah, and Joe, I want to echo that for our clients, they've had to overcome some barriers to become clients. There's some financial decisions that each of us has made that we're not super proud of. And to sit in front of an advisor and rehash that, that's not something anyone looks forward to. You may even look forward to meeting with an estate attorney more than you look forward to that conversation. And how are we going to treat our children equally? If you're facing retirement and thinking through your financial plan, those same issues you're having trouble with, your parents are having that same issue. How are we going to treat everyone equally? Yes, we want a family member to help us, but we don't want to hurt everyone's feelings that they're not the helper. And there's just all of those dynamics to get through. The way Joe and I work best with clients is having that family meeting, stepping into that awkward conversation and laying it all out there. For some families, that requires a couple meetings. Some families can do it in one meeting. It's always different. I've actually had some clients invite their parents to that meeting. And I've thought that's an interesting strategy to say, okay, we're going to lead by example. Here's what we're doing. Here's what we're talking about as a family. And it's kind of funny in the meeting to see the tables turn to the parent and think, okay, what have you done about this? So I actually, that was a client's idea. I had not thought of that, but as I get more experience in this arena, that's something I would recommend for families as well.
Do you see disagreement in these meetings between a husband and wife? They may turn to each other and say, "Well, I didn't know you wanted to do that."
We like to think we have it all planned out before the meeting starts to not get there, but these are really personal decisions on your choices for your assets and who gets what. So disagreements are normal, and we have an environment for our clients to have those tough conversations. But the fun part of a family meeting is you just see the weight come off of everyone's shoulders of, okay, we knew these decisions were being made. At least now we have some directions on who's receiving the assets, who your estate helpers are.
That's a great point, Dave. I'll say one final point on the generational differences. Again, we're talking about folks, are on the older end of the range for our clients or parents. There's a fear of running out of money still. So that inherited trauma, right? These are folks who could have been, born in the depression, right? Certainly, or were raised by people who lived during that time. And so there's this almost sometimes to an extreme concern of, well, wait, we're going to run out of money. Even though someone like Dave or myself could objectively say, no, actually, you could, you're 86 and this money will probably last 86 more years at the rate you're spending it. But that's a challenge that has to be overcome in this process. And the family meeting is sometimes a great opportunity for mom and dad in this case, or mom or dad. They can. We've had clients together with mom or dad who say, "Hey, we're good. Like we're not counting on this money." I think I've had a couple clients who assumed their kids were counting on their wealth. And I'm like, well, I got to pass it on because that's what my parents did for me. And so there was some reassurance from their kids who are our clients that no, like we could have none of this and be great. We're in great shape, but yeah, this is a wonderful gift you're going to leave for us, but don't let it impact how you're existing.
That's a
And
great
Dave, I know we're talking before the meeting, but let's talk about a few more client examples because we do see this more and more. And I think, as Dave said, I like his quote: "Step into the awkward."
I had an example, or I had a experience with that this weekend, Joe. Before doing the podcast, I figured I should go do what I share with others. So I sat down with my grandmother and I looked at her assets and looked to simplify those affairs. She doesn't have a very complicated situation. Her house is her most valuable asset, but over her 91 years, she's accumulated some complexity. Like most people in her generation, she likes to open a lot of CDs at different banks that are giving the best rate. And guess what? Each new CD comes with a new account. And as her tax preparer, I can tell you that each new CD comes with a new tax form. And so doing her tax return this year reminded me that, boy, we need to simplify this. There's a generation between us, so I get the way we think about money is different, and I've always tried to be respectful of that. But I did learn this weekend that she's not settled in a state before. She's not gone to all these different banks in town to say, "Hey, I'm the executor. This is what the will says. Here's the court appointment. This is going through probate." And then to do that 15 times over for every different bank in town. So we started our conversation this weekend with some education. She made me laugh when I brought up some of her dividend reinvestments that she has from mutual companies that were demutualized. And she loves getting this $25 quarterly dividend check. And it's not just one, she has them coming from multiple places. And I said, "Well, Grandma, getting this stock to your three sons and dividing these pennies up and cutting each penny into three is going to be a pain." And she just laughed and said, "Send it to unclaimed funds," which I thought was a funny solution. And frankly, I told her, if you look at the hourly rate to get those stocks into the appropriate hands of her sons, unclaimed funds actually sounds pretty attractive. But once we could agree that it would be a lot of work, we started the consolidation process. We're going to try to have no more accounts than what we need. And most people think once they have an estate plan, whether that's a will centered plan or a trust centered plan, that they've done the hard work. But as Joe and I know, the hard work, you haven't even started it. The hard work is updating beneficiaries and updating titling and adding power of attorney to the account prior to that person really needing to step in. So all of these things we're discussing today, I am working through with grandma. The dollars are not huge, but if we didn't go through this process, the work on the back end when she passes would be quite significant. So I don't think grandma listens to podcasts, but if she does, she could tell you all of this is true.
and then she talked to you in the back room later on.
There was an eye roll or two involved, but we're making good progress. Joe, what has your experience been like on helping the older generations through this process?
I'll say one thing that has come up a few times recently is my parents already have an advisor. So, in other words, thanks for checking in, but they got somebody, and there's an assumption, I think, that somebody will help them be organized in the way that we here at Foster Motley help our clients be organized and be prepared and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. Uh, that's not always the case, right? There's a lot of people that fall under that quoted advisor umbrella, right? Some look like us. Some focus entirely on investments. Some sell insurance. But overall, a lot of them don't offer the same level of comprehensive financial planning with this focus on titling and on estate planning and doing the bunch of boring little things right that make the plan work. Some advisors just don't care to do that, nor do they even purport to do that. So I think that's something that we try to be aware of is support and advisor support can look different for different people. Some people lean on people who aren't financial advisors entirely as their trusted support. Maybe it's a CPA, an accountant who does the tax returns. Maybe it's an attorney. What type of attorney is that attorney? Are they an estate planner? Do they focus on elder law and more Medicaid type planning? Are they kind of a jack of all trades, and do they do business work? So there's a wide range of quote my parents have an advisor type people, and I think just knowing that they may be doing great things for them, or they may not be touching any of this is something we try to be aware of as we ask these potentially awkward questions and enter into these conversations with our clients and their loved ones.
Yeah, I agree, Joe. I'll echo the point that just because you have an accountant, an attorney, and a financial advisor, the roles that those people do are always different. I can think of every client example, who's going to do what, depending on the expertise of those folks. The responsibility is going to land in a different spot. So just because you have those folks, and it's great that you do, agreeing to who's going to do what on the team looks a little bit different in each circumstance.
Well, what do you suggest then as a first step? You're the child. You want to guide your parents or help your parents or just find out if they've done anything. What is the first step?
The first step is embrace the awkward, have the conversation. Any tough conversation's always best when you've done it yourself and you can say, this was no fun, but I'm glad I did it. And here's what I learned. And I would like to help you accomplish the same thing. So it always starts with the conversation. If there was one piece of data that you could get to start to get your arms around it, that would probably be a tax return. That's going to start to give you a roadmap of, okay, what accounts are out there, what's generating interest, what has had capital gains. But that's going to be far from the full picture. So start with the conversation, review a tax return. Joe, what are your key action items that you would suggest?
I would say make sure there's agreement on who's helping and their roles. So this is back to Dave's point on communication is key, right? And make sure that people who aren't directly involved are informed, right? Because anytime that there's money movements or money discussions or anything tangentially related to money, people's antennas go up real fast. And that's a potentially messier situation than you got when you started. So, but at the same time, it's not always practical to say, all right, everybody get together, having a big family meeting, let's go. So I would say start small, right? Dave's going through this right now with his grandma. He knows he can't go in with the big long list of things or none of it's getting done, right? That's not just true in this situation. That's true for a lot of people, right? No one wants to see a big long list. They want to see the first one or two things that need to get knocked out, even if there's 37 items behind it. So that start small, hit the things that are really important. So powers of attorney, right? Those feel important. Making sure that there are people in place who are their helpers. We call them helpers, right? The folks named as your attorney, in fact, in your financial and healthcare powers of attorney. That feels like a critical item. Like, hey, mom, hey, dad, do you have these documents? All right. When were they updated? 1997. Okay. There's people in here who aren't around anymore. Let's get those updated. Or you don't have one at all. Let's get those in place. Those are easy to do quickly. And then maybe next we think about that asset consolidation piece. Cause like Dave said, there's nothing like a mess of, 14 accounts that you got to run down and they all have small dollar amounts, but hey, as you're in the role of executor, you have a duty to make sure everything is done right. And you have family members who aren't in that role who want to make sure that they get what's theirs, and that's That's not a knock against them. That's just, hey, everybody wants what they're entitled to. Then you as the executor have to go and run down all these accounts, file all these forms. You have to deal with banks. You have to deal with custodians. It's a lot of work. So you can save yourself a lot of work by cleaning up multiple accounts, consolidating them where possible, encouraging, maybe he will get a few less CDs in here. Hey, let's look at this money market fund. It happens to yield pretty much what those CDs are yielding, and it's liquid, and I don't have to worry about assets being in 6 different banks because you can put it all in this one account. So I'd say start small, identify the things that are most important, and communicate.
Agreed on the communication. And if there's one point I would leave our listeners with today, I recommend going to fosterandmotley.com and searching family letter. And there you will find a template to help start that conversation. We always encourage leading by example. So do it for yourself and then share it with your children, your parents, anyone that you think you may be named an estate helper, especially an executor or a trustee for. Share that document. I had a client send me an email this weekend, and he said, I just finished wrapping up my brother's estate, and here's what I learned. And the key points are contained in that document. So he said, I wish I would have known the scope of my brother's affairs. He said, with the tax return, I was able to learn some things. But guess what? A tax return didn't tell me if my brother had life insurance. It didn't tell me if my brother had a safe deposit box. It didn't tell me where he hid his valuables or what subscriptions he had or how I was supposed to care for his pet. So that family letter document, that the template is out on our website. It covers all of those things that are a really nice complement to an estate plan. My client also shared that access was key. Without his brother's cell phone and computer, he would have been paralyzed. He couldn't have paid bills and had access to credit card records to understand what all he had. Guess what? That's part of that family letter template too. Where are passwords? What are the key passwords I need to know to step into your shoes? And then lastly, that client recommend keep good notes because every conversation you have, they're going to start blending together as you talk to a credit card company and a bank and an investment company. So keep good records along the way. So I think from someone that just lived it and found that family letter template helpful, I encourage everyone to use that. To be clear, his brother did not have that template. He simply wishes he did in hindsight. So he is actively sharing it with other family members. So I guess in closing, other valuable tools are out on the Foster and Motley website at fosterandmotley.com. There you can get a hold of Joe or myself or others on the Foster Motley team. We certainly welcome a conversation about how to make your estate plans more efficient and how you can help those that you love make their plans more efficient as well.
And Dave, you just wrapped that up beautifully. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Dave Nienaber, Joe Patterson, great stuff here. You can contact Foster and Motley most definitely, but follow the podcast for topics they're talking about. You know also when the next show will be ready for you. And of course, share them with others. We value your time, and thanks for being with us.